this project is going really well. And today we have Roberto Soto joining us, who's going to tell us about his path. I know he got his degrees, got a couple of degrees out in California, and then a PhD at Iowa, and now it's back at Fullerton. And he'll tell you all about that. Of course, we have Donald Cole to do the interviewing. And you can't say more about Donald Cole than I've already said. Well, I can say a lot more, but that's not what we're here for. So I'm going to leave you guys to have your conversation. I appreciate you both taking the time. It's just great. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Thank you,
for
Donald.
doing this. That's okay.
All right.
Okay, Roberto, you're coming in loud and clear. And you, am I clear to you? And you can see me as well?
Yes, both.
Okay,
Thank you.
very good. As David mentioned, we've met before several times.
Right.
I'm Donald Cole, and been with the Alliance for a number of years, and we wanted to interview you today to get your perspectives and your experiences on how and what it is that kind of got you to the point that you are in life today. Our idea is to put this on the web and be able to show this to a number of people to kind of encourage them somewhere along the way. And so I'm going to ask some questions of you. Some of them will be pointed questions, and some will be open-ended questions. The whole process probably shouldn't take any more than an hour, but you don't have to rush at any point along the way. So just kind of feel comfortable. And I know you hadn't received any of these questions before, so they're not going to be anything overly embarrassing either.
Okay, good.
So first of all, just for the record, let's get you to give me a short mathematical chronological of your timeline and kind of mention your name and where you grew up, and then kind of take me through your education from each one of the institutions.
Okay. So I grew up, well, my name is Roberto Soto, and currently I'm an assistant professor of mathematics at Cal State Fullerton, math education, actually. And I've been there, I just completed my 5th year, but it all started out for me in Baldwin Park in California, a small town, home of In-N-Out Burger. That's where the In-N-Out Burger, if anybody's familiar with California, that's the town where it all started. And then I went to UCLA for undergrad, originally as a computer science major, with my backup plan was to study history. Even though I liked math, I didn't know that that's something you could do anything without other than being a teacher. And at that time in my life, that's not what I wanted to do. I didn't want to teach. Then I took a couple of classes at UCLA, some calculus classes, and I realized I was pretty good at this. I liked it. I enjoyed it, and it wasn't as challenging as computer science, that's for sure. At least not at that point. And so I decided to switch, not really knowing what I would do with that major right off the bat. I switched maybe in my junior year. And then I think around that time, I started thinking, well, maybe I teach high school. I mean, this is all I know what you can do with math, so maybe I'll try that. I found a really nice program at UCLA that would allow me to start my master's as a senior at UCLA, and then finish a master's and get a credential in 1 year after I had finished my bachelor's. So I thought that was a really sweet deal. And I got placed, and I would get placed at a high school somewhere in LA. So I thought, I'd get a job, I'd get the degree. In fact, I'd get 2 degrees and I'd save some money. But okay, I could do this. And that's what I did. I got a master's in education at UCLA, and got introduced to social justice. Not something you hear in the hallways of mathematics at UCLA. That's the first time I had heard about social justice, and hadn't really taken any other classes in undergrad. And so I started thinking, that me as a math teacher, I could really affect some change in the community like I grew up in. And so after working 2 years at I worked in LAUSD, but really I worked in Pacific Palisades. So it wasn't what most people would think. It was a really kind of sweet job. I started thinking, I want to go back to my old neighborhood. And so I taught high school for 6 years at Sierra Vista High School in Baldwin Park. And then I just started thinking that there's more. I wanted to do more math. I really wanted I wanted to know what that was like. So I pursued a master's in math at Cal State San Bernardino. Got some really good mentoring, got some really good information, Took me a while to get there. I think I started my master's in 2005, finished in 2008. And then in 2010, I was finally brave enough to take the plunge, go to Iowa and get the PhD 5 years ago now. Yeah, in 2015.
Mm.
So, I always say it was just yesterday, but no, it's 5 years ago. It was a while back.
Oh man, are you sure it's not Roberto Cole, which is my last name? And I say that because my son, who's a math major undergraduate, and he taught a high school for a number of years. He's doing something else now, but I want to see him go back and get his PhD as well. So
okay, all right.
yeah, and it's kind of interesting about the social justice part, and I'll ask you something about that a little later, and your interest and love for history as well.
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
okay, very interesting. Okay, but you've been with the Alliance for a good while, and I've been with it for a good while. We've seen each other around.
Right.
And since these interviews are kind of being sponsored by the Alliance, I want you to tell me a little bit about your thoughts about the Alliance and your participation in it, how you became associated with it, any names that kind of surfaced from it. And when you sort of sit back and hear the word Mathematical Alliance for Doctoral Studies in Mathematics, what comes to mind?
Right. I am lucky. I consider myself very fortunate to have stumbled on the Math Alliance, and it literally stumbled. My wife and I were both going to San Bernardino. I think the year was 2008, maybe 2009. But yeah, 2008. And she was talking to her advisor, LSAMP advisor, and I was with her. And we were looking for programs, PhD programs that were, supportive of minority students, that really wanted to help them, succeed, and that provided a collaborative environment for us to learn, because we knew that's what we wanted. And the first school that came out of his mouth was Iowa. And then he said Nebraska and Iowa State also. And so I was working at the time at a district, so I was making more money than I'm making now, actually, because I was in the administration at that time. And so I told my wife, why don't we take a trip to the Midwest and see what this is all about? See if we can actually, if two people from Baldwin Park can figure out Iowa. And so we visited all the three schools, but when we got to Iowa, we got to meet Phil. He always says it's a lucky thing that we met him, because we just decided to show up on their doorstep almost without really announcing that we were going to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dan Anderson takes us quickly to Phil's office and says, here, you should talk to them. And we had a really good conversation. And at the end of the conversation, he goes, we have a Field of Dreams conference next week. Would you like to come? And we're like, well, we can't afford it. And he goes, no, we'll pay for everything. And I'm thinking, it's a week. You only have a week to prepare us. He has to pay for it. So it was really expensive, but he was so generous and said, hey, yeah, we'll invite you. So we both said, yes, we're going to come. And when we went to that Alliance, that was our first Alliance conference. And I was blown away. I was just, I couldn't believe so many students, African-American, Latinos, Native Americans loved math so much and wanted to pursue a PhD in mathematics. I'd never seen that before myself. I'd never really met too many Latinos, that or Latinas that loved math and had PhDs in math. So I thought this was really great. And to see actual people with PhDs, I think that was even more eye-popping. It was a really, really good experience. And in fact, it cemented. We got to meet. It was at Iowa that year, so we got to meet a lot of Iowa students, and that sort of cemented our decision to go there.
Okay.
And since then, of course, being at Iowa, we got to help out with another conference. And then when I became a professor, I knew that was the first place I wanted to. Well, first of all, I knew I wanted to go back to California, because I knew there's a lot of people like me, but also I didn't know what was going on. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted to make sure that they went to the conference. So every year I've tried to take, since I started at Cal State Fullerton, I've tried to take a few students to the Math Alliance. And in back is a picture of the latest students that went. I think there's 14 of them from Cal State Fullerton.
Yeah.
And I got to go. They got me a picture and signed it. And so it is definitely, it means a lot to me. And I think a lot of the students that I take, their eyes are open in many different ways. And so I think it's a really good conference for us to learn more about what it means to be a mathematician.
Yeah. Okay. And you've been a great asset, certainly to the alliances as well. And I always look forward to seeing you and your students.
Thank you.
Uh, Roberto, I tell you what, you are a very accomplished person. Here you are with a PhD in mathematics. You must be a genius. How do you respond when people say that?
You know, if you would have told my younger self, I would say yes. I I think when I was younger, definitely when I was at UCLA, I thought you had to be a genius to get a PhD. I really did. I didn't. In fact, that was one of the reasons maybe I didn't go for it. I didn't see myself. I didn't know what it took to get a PhD in mathematics. I thought you. I remember thinking, well, you have to prove a new theorem. How do you do that? I mean, I can prove the ones everybody else has proved, but how do you prove something new from scratch? Where do you come up with this stuff? And it just seemed so far-fetched. I go, that's just too scary. And so I did think you needed to be a genius. Now on the other side of it, and after so many years of teaching, I realized that, you know, those students that do really well, they just have, my wife says it, they just have a lot of grit. They just work really hard. And that's what it took for me too, just work really hard. Not everything, I don't know everything. I always tell my students I don't know everything. In fact, there are some times that you may know more than I do about a certain topic, but you know, I know that I can learn math. I know math just takes time and dedication, and it can be learned, you know. And so it's, I definitely don't think it's well, if the word genius means a lot of hard work, then yes, I guess. But if the word genius means that you're just naturally talented, I'd have to say no. I think that's not what it is at all.
Well, if it doesn't mean that, we'll redefine it to mean
Right.
lots of hard work.
A lot of hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I wanted to for you to impress with the students who see this interview for sure. And
Right.
it's just a matter of love for the subject and lots of work.
Yeah,
But you know, but you're working at something that you love. So
yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
you spend more time on it, so of course you're going to learn it. Right.
No doubt about it. Let me maybe ask something a little more personable, and feel free if you don't want to answer, to skip it or give any type of response that you want. I want you to tell me about a time in your mathematical life in which you were kind of at a low ebb.
Right.
You know, with which you were almost devastated and ready to quit. And then I want you to balance us off with a time in your life in which you were very proud of something that you've done in the mathematical vein. So give me those two extremes.
I think so. It wasn't mathematics that did me in as much as computer science. So my second quarter at UCLA, I was taking Calc 2, I was taking a second computer science class, and I was taking chemistry. And I remember one week just feeling overwhelmed with a computer science project. The math homework was fine. I was happy with that. Chemistry was getting difficult. I think we were doing quantum. And so I just felt sort of like, I don't know if I can do computer science. And I remember being outside of a building at UCLA and just really thinking about my life. If this is something I wanted to do, if this is something I wanted to pursue. And it took me maybe an hour or two to sort of compose myself, but I eventually started thinking about sort of what's important in life, you know, kind of try to regain some new perspective. And I started thinking about my family and my parents. Sorry about that. Started thinking about my parents and sort of what the sacrifices they had made and how they had been able to raise 5 kids, where my dad was a truck driver and my mom, you know, worked as a housekeeper. And I go, well, if they were able to raise a family and that's something that I want, then I'll figure something out. Maybe it's not computer science, but I'll figure something out. And at that point, once I go, what I should do is just focus on learning what I can and just focusing on trying to find a job. I know with an education I can get there. It doesn't matter what it is. And that sort of freed me to always look at, so that sort of freed me as an undergrad, so that even though I got a D on my first test in linear algebra, I go, it's okay, I'll figure this out. I ended up doing well in that course. It went well. It was just eye-opening. I didn't know how to write a proof yet. I was writing 2-column proofs and they wanted words, like sentences. I'm like,
Oh, geometry proofs.
Yeah, I didn't know. Who would have ever told me you're supposed to write sentences, right? But then I think having taught high school and seeing the students that were successful, getting to meet so many students that at first I was, wow, they're really struggling. But then seeing their grit sort of pay off in the end made me sort of realize when I went back to school, I went back when I was 35. So at that point, my perspective had really shifted into the sense where I knew, well, how did my students that struggled, how do they attack this? Whenever I struggled, I asked myself, well, what do they do? And, well, they just worked harder. They just worked harder and forgave themselves and weren't too hard on themselves and just progressed and progressed. And so I think in that sense, having been a teacher really helped me overcome the struggles that, of course, I mean, I'm not really good at analysis. It was really hard, but I said, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way, And so I was sort of spared that because I had been a high school teacher. I was able to see how other people were able to overcome their difficulties. So it was kind of nice. And it gave me a different perspective at the end. But I almost quit. Oh, there was one point where and I think this helps me think about my students a lot. There was one point where I think it was the first year at Iowa where I almost gave it up, not because of math, but because of family. My wife was struggling at Iowa and we were thinking about maybe this wasn't the right fit for us. And I applied for a job in California. So I almost decided that this wasn't going to go because at the end of the day, family is really important to me. We figured that out too. It took us a while. It was a really sort of tough time for us, but we ended up really enjoying Iowa. That ended up being really good for both of us. We grew a lot as people. We got to see a part of the US that was different than California, which was really good for us to kind of understand, America a little bit better. And now I think I remember 2 points. Well, there's like 3 things that I'm really excited about math. The first one was when I first wrote a proof for my thesis on my own without my advisor's help. I thought that was really cool. Like, she had nothing to do with it. I was there and I did it and I showed it to her and she goes, yeah, that's right. And I go, right, I know how to do this. That was one. I think the second one was having my parents at my graduation at Iowa, seeing them see me get a PhD. That's something I think they maybe never imagined, but having them there. Yeah. And the third one was that this year, my first few students graduated from Cal State. The ones I met my first semester at Cal State Fullerton, this year is when they graduated, and to see them graduate and get accepted to graduate programs, master's and PhD programs, or become teachers, it's been really kind of nice to see that. I think that's been really fulfilling and has really kind of made me realize this is where I want to be. Like this idea of using math for social justice, it's a thing that works. It's a way for me to, the students to keep telling me, that being there for them helped them realize that they could figure it out eventually and get their degrees. And so that makes me really happy that they finished and that they're not just finished, but are still continuing their education.
Oh, okay. Those are some great ones. And of course, it reminded me about myself when you mentioned computer science, because that has given me my highest high and my lowest low. I'm trying to figure out when that program won't run. What's wrong with it?
I know.
The answer, I'm convinced the answer never comes before 3 a.m.
That's right. That's right.
If you had to do it all over again, what would you do different?
Knowing what I know now, I think I would have looked out for a mentor. I think that's something earlier in my career. I always tell people that I'm glad I was able to teach, because I think teaching high school and going to the UCLA's master's program in education helped open my eyes to things that I'd never seen before. So to me, math used to be always right, which is what I liked when I was an undergrad. Like there was always an answer. There was always a way to there's always a way to put logic together and prove something. But when I got to see the rest of the world, I realized I would have never seen that as a math, especially not as a pure mathematician. I don't know if I would have seen that at all. I would have kind of been blind to a lot of the injustices that are in our world. So it opened up my eyes in a way that I'd never thought about before. It helped me see that I was very privileged in many ways. I mean, being the firstborn son of a Latino family carries tons of privileges that I would have never seen before. And I think it's part of the reason I was successful, because I had some privileges like that. And I don't think I would have been aware I would have thought, if somebody else couldn't do it, I would have said, well, it's your fault. But I think if I were to do it again, I did need some mentorship, and that would have been hard. It would have been hard to find back then. It would have been difficult to find back then. But I think now I know, if I was in this day and age, find someone that really cares for you and wants the best for you, and ask questions. And I think that's where I sort of failed. I was too afraid to ask questions. I was too afraid of being, since Matt, you're always right, I was too afraid of being wrong. Wrong with everything. I was maybe too cautious. And so that's definitely a place where I think I've grown a lot more. It's still hard for me to ask for help, but I do think I've grown a lot more in that respect. And yeah, I wish I could have told my younger self to do something like that. At that time, I'm thinking, so I graduated from college in '97. So I don't know if there were any programs like Iowa back then. But people did it. I mean, I've met other folks that have graduated during that time. So people have done it. I just didn't know how to do it back then. Yeah.
Oh,
and there was one professor I remember who tried, but I just didn't get it. Jennifer Chase. I think she was at UCLA, and I believe she's at Microsoft now. And I just didn't quite understand what she was trying to tell me. Like, it didn't fit in my mind that she thought I can get a PhD, and I kind of wish I would have listened to her. That's definitely something that keeps going through my mind. I wish I would have asked her what that meant. Yeah.
Well, that's a great response, because if the roles were reversed and you would be interviewing me, I think those are the words that I would love to say.
Oh, thank you.
So characteristic of me as well. It's our hope that this interview would be placed online and seen by a number of people. And I suspect that we want to distribute it, and it wouldn't surprise me if some youth who was 12 years old or 18-year-old were to view it, or someone who was just entering college, or some female who's has an interest in mathematics. And if you sort of look at those dynamics in that age group and those categories of people who might very well be interested in math, and who are just getting started out, what type of advice would you give them?
I think follow your curiosity. Follow the things that you really love about math. Continue to talk to people about the things that you love so much. I think, like I said earlier, find that mentor, that person that sort of inspires you and pushes you and wants the best for you. And to not give up. I mean, it's supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be hard. That PhD was not a walk in the park. There were some classes, there were some moments where I'm like, I don't know if I can get this right now. But in fact, I think I've learned a lot more as a teacher afterwards than actually during the PhD program. Like, when you get to teach the class, you go, oh, that's what they were trying to say. I remember at one point working on my thesis, and something finally made sense to me, and I'm going, oh, that's what that class was about. That's what they were trying to say at that moment. So I think with math, it just takes a lot of engagement, and it's engagement with the material, but engagement with other people too. It really does take sort of all of us to figure this out. And to not give up on it, to keep searching for avenues to kind of feed that curiosity that you have. I know a lot of my students now, they go to, what was that? There's a YouTube video. It's not called YouTube. It's a channel about numbers. Oh gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking out. But there's a math channel that they can watch videos about math. Number File, that's what it is. Number File.
Okay,
And yeah. So, and I think that's great that they're searching for trying to fulfill their curiosity and take chances. I always tell my students to look for opportunities to do your own research. You have a question, try to answer it. Try to see if anybody's answered it, but if anybody hasn't, go for it. Try to answer it itself. Mm-hmm. And if you're in high school or middle school, I keep thinking about, well, I chose to be a professor and I chose to be a high school teacher. That's only two of many, many different jobs out there. And I always tell them, I'm not done yet. I think eventually I want to learn some stats and go work for the Dodgers or work for the Lakers, or, go do some statistics-based work, or learn. Like, eventually I see myself, once I get tenure and once I get to be a professor, then maybe I can continue studying the math that interests me at the moment, you know, and not be so pigeonholed to the one thing. I think having that PhD gives me a little bit of freedom to pursue the things that I'm interested in. And it's okay. And that's kind of fun, you know, whether it's industry or academia or government jobs. I feel like I have now, I'm empowered to pursue different opportunities.
I'm just loving your responses,
Thank you, Don.
you're just making me reflect so much, and how guilt feelings would be upon me for appreciating something that I now teach that I was supposed to have learned a good while back.
Right.
And I can remember, putting down the right answers to kind of get through the class, but now I have the right understanding, which is a totally
Right.
at a different level. So
Yes.
I certainly appreciate that. And I might comment on something else you said that made me think of the amplitude of mathematics and how large the field is. And because perhaps one area you're not the greatest in, but you're a little better in another area. And people tend to think that if you're in mathematics, it's all the same, or you got to be great in one area as the next. But it's a very large field.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can remind me of that. Yeah. Now you're a very accomplished person, lots of degrees behind you and your name with mathematics on it. And you touched upon this, and you might give the same answer again. But when was it that you sort of realized, okay, I'm finally a mathematician?
Right. That's funny you asked that. You know, I thought that when I was in my math classes proving theorems, I felt like a mathematician then. But it wasn't until I started thinking about a PhD that I realized, oh, okay, maybe there's something else I don't know how to do. Because obviously I was afraid. So I go, there's something else I'm not getting about what it means to be a mathematician. So there was a little reservation after I finished my degree that maybe I wasn't. But I do remember sitting in my office one day, this is as a grad student, working on my thesis, and doing some calculations and seeing some patterns and thinking about maybe other ways of attacking the problem, and then kind of being at the beginning of a proof. And I said, oh, this is what mathematicians do. They look at data, they look for patterns, they start formulating a proof, they start thinking about questions, they go, oh, okay, now I think I'm a mathematician at this point. Because I finally felt that, I'd done something different than what it was in the classroom. In the classroom, you're looking for the right answer. And here, I didn't know what the answer was, and neither did my advisor. And so that was the first time I thought, oh, okay, this is what mathematicians do. And I realized that part of me helping the next generation is continuing to do mathematics, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be high level to me, but I do need to continue to feed that sort of curiosity, because it does help me feel like a mathematician so my students can understand what it's like. I don't want to ever forget that feeling that I felt that day when I was in my office.
Great. Oh man, that's great. Let me dig off into you a little bit more on the personal side. You kind of mentioned some of this, but go back and kind of describe again your community that you grew up in, and now that you are a professional mathematician and you're at a certain place in life, you probably have a different community that you're dealing with on a daily basis. But tell me how something about each one of those and how you kind of merge the two together now that you're a professional mathematician.
Right. So I think I moved around a lot as a young kid. I think eventually my parents settled in Baldwin Park right around when I was 5, and they stayed there maybe 20 years. And so I think of Baldwin Park as my hometown, even though I only lived there maybe when I went to school and when I was a high school teacher. And it's a community where when I was going to school there, I would say maybe 70 to 80% of the community was Latino, Latina, Latinx. But all of our teachers were white. Every single one of our teachers were white. In fact, the first teacher that I ever heard speak Spanish was my 4th grade teacher. and she was from Spain, and she was the only one in the whole school that spoke Spanish. And then when I got to high school, there was only one teacher that was Latino, and he was an ESL teacher. And all my other teachers were not, like, nobody else really, I couldn't identify with any of them, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But we weren't considered poor, but we weren't really middle class. We were sort of in that, straddling that line between middle class and lower class. It was sort of one of these towns where most of us were in free or reduced lunch, but most of us lived in a house, maybe not the most beautiful house, but it was a house. And when I was there, I knew I was sort of different. I knew I liked math more than most people. I knew I liked school more than most people. Part of me wanted to hide that, so I played sports. I played baseball and I played football. I didn't want anybody to pigeonhole me as, this is the math guy, but I knew I liked school. And I remember being a little bit, what do you call it? Oh, conceited, I guess would be the right word. Maybe not conceited, but that's the word I would have used in high school, because that's the only word I knew. But a little bit thinking that I was where I was at because of my hard work, and everybody else should have done what I did. Not really thinking about the backgrounds that people came from. This is why I mentioned that it wasn't until I went to UCLA's master's program that it kind of my eyes opened. To me, I thought it was their fault that they were where they're at, and they should just be like me, and we would be fine. So I was very sort of closed-minded to why people weren't getting ahead in a way. And so when I finished my master's program at UCLA, I realized that I was wrong, that I was very wrong about that feeling, and that maybe the best way for me to kind of change the narrative was to go back and help students kind of overcome some of those barriers that they were having trouble overcoming by offering them an education that would show them sort of what math, like my feeling was that if they were really good at math, then they could find a place somewhere. And because if you get really good at math, it means you know how to work hard. And once you know how to work hard, well, two things. They already knew how to work hard. I think understanding math makes you feel like you are a genius, right? Even though we know it's not true. Like sometimes as soon as you get it, you're like, oh, this is what people were having trouble with. And it sort of empowers you. It sort of makes you feel like I can go out there and do really well. And so a lot of my students in my AP, I remember one of my students recently came back and told me, that being in my AP calculus course helped him give him the confidence at UC San Diego to sort of feel like he belonged there. He goes, I was really upset that I earned a B in your class, but when I was at UC San Diego, I was tutoring all these rich white kids. And I'm like, I'm here, Latino from Baldwin Park, and I'm tutoring all these kids that were able to afford tutors. And I realized it's because what I learned. So he felt empowered, and now he's himself is now a middle school teacher, a math teacher in West Covina, which is close to Baldwin Park. And so part of me never really wants to get away from the community. So which is why, similar when I went to Iowa, my hope was that I'd be able to end up at a Cal State, any of the Cal States in Southern California, because I knew that's where I would have ended up maybe, or some of my students from Baldwin Park would have ended up. So I wanted to be close by and help them sort of, again, break those barriers and have an ally, I guess, or have someone, not even an ally, an advocate to help them overcome the things that they needed to overcome to sometimes just to get to where they want to go. And so I feel like at Fullerton, where half of the population, more than 40% is first generation, more than 44% is Latinx. We're a minority serving institution. I feel like there I'm connected to students that come from communities like me, and the ones that are in that back picture, most of them are coming from schools that are like mine. And so I feel I'm connected every day in the work that I do. I wanted to go back to my old high school and say, hey, look, now I know more, I want to share. And I actually I was gonna go visit on March 16th of this year. And that's when they canceled, they closed down California.
Oh, okay.
And so I wasn't able, but I think that's sort of the next step, is now I wanna see if I can connect back. So I think at Cal State Fullerton, I get the students that are lucky enough and privileged enough to have a college education, but I would like to go back and say, okay, let's talk about the other students that maybe aren't being afforded those opportunities, and what can we do to help them kind of think of math in a different way, think about what problems we can solve with mathematics. So that is something I'm looking forward to. I was thinking after tenure, that would be the right thing to do next. And so hopefully that'll happen soon. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. A little earlier, you mentioned the term social justice, and we probably would be amiss if we didn't talk about what's going on today in our social climate here in the United States as we entering a national debate concerning the death of George Floyd, police brutality, and here you are, a professional mathematician yourself, and so as a mathematician, and then over here on the other side, this thing that we do call social justice, how do we merge those two? Is there any common ground that we can kind of talk about that mathematics give us a platform to talk about any of that?
Yeah, part of the reason I want to learn stats is well, okay, there's two things I wanted to say. The first one was that as a mathematician, I feel like one of the things that we do well is look for patterns, and look for patterns and try to predict. It's something that almost all of us mathematicians do this. And I feel we could have predicted that this was going to happen again. And in fact, even this weekend, it happened in Georgia again. So it's almost like, how can we not see the data? And I sometimes wish I was a statistician as opposed to a pure mathematician, because the data is loud and clear. There's no other way about it. This is something we should have taken care of 30 years ago when Rodney King here in LA, when that happened. That should have been taken care of a long time ago. We should have done more. And as mathematicians, we understand that mathematics isn't neutral, that whoever has the power tells the story. And right now, unfortunately, the schools that can change the conversation really don't reflect the populations that we live in. So I keep thinking about my experience at UCLA and my experience now as a Cal State professor, and very, very different. I feel like in the Cal State system, we take students that maybe weren't deemed ready for a UC, but they're going to get PhDs at Iowa. They're professors at Purdue. We're at Cal State Fullerton. So I feel like we add a lot of value at a Cal State system, whereas the UC system, it's almost the backwards. You have a minority go there, and it's almost like, well, they're not getting further. It seems like they're being held back. And so somehow these places of power, these places that are considered the elites, we need to start the conversation there. How can we change what those schools look like so that they can represent, for example, the UC should look like California, and unfortunately they don't. The student body doesn't look like that, and the faculty even less. And so to me, that is something that as mathematicians, we can control that. We can control who we admit, we can control who we recruit, we can control how we go about getting students prepared. So if they don't meet your GPA, if they don't meet your test scores or whatever requirement you decide, well, what can you do to make sure that they're prepared? What are some of the supports you can provide to make sure that we can be successful? And that could change the narrative completely about, if we can change who can do math, I think we can definitely change the world. At the same time, I think this idea of noticing patterns, there is a little bit of hope that I have. Again, being from California, I was a college student in the 1990s. Rodney King was going on. We had this proposition to not allow basic services for undocumented folks, and we were trying to get rid of affirmative action, Prop 209. And so I remember being out there protesting, and I noticed that in the 1990s, when there was a backlash against those of us that look different, California started to change. And then we're still not perfect. We still got a lot of change to do, but we started to change a little bit, and we started to thinking differently about what California represented. And when I see these protests going on, and I see kind of the fervor there, and I start thinking about, this reminds me a lot of what was going on in California in the 1990s. And I really hope that means that our nation is finally turning a corner and maybe really taking seriously this idea of change. And hopefully this is the catalyst to some things that are happening better. But of course, I'm kind of always hopeful. And I hope I'm right. I want to be optimistic, and I'm hoping that this is definitely something that's leading us. And those of us that are mathematicians can definitely have a voice. And I think most people think we're reasonable. So if we say something, I think people will listen to us. Right.
No, I certainly appreciate your responding on that. Roberto, we've looked at you currently where you are. We've sort of looked at the Roberto of the past. Let's just look futuristically and tell me where will Roberto be and what will he be doing 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, etc. Well, what does the future look like?
Well, I'm 45, so 20 years from now, I might be retired.
I'm 70, and so I'm already retired.
But I think 5 years from now, I still see myself taking students to the field of dreams. I still, one of the places, I think maybe because I am closer to retirement, I feel like, or closer to, I guess most mathematicians start their careers around 30, and I feel like I missed 15 years of that. And so I feel like I need to make sure that I make an impact now. And so a lot of the work that I've been doing recently has been focused on a lot of areas that maybe help our community. So for example, the first thing is teaching. I do think a lot about how can we change teaching at the university level to help students that have been denied an education before. So I've been doing a lot of research on active learning, specifically how do you help faculty make that change to create a more inclusive environment, and that focuses more on how to get students to learn. So usually there's enough data to show that this will help our students. So how can we continue doing that? So that's part of what I've been doing recently. I've also been looking a lot, working with the Math Alliance. So that work I think will continue. How do we diversify and broaden participation in the mathematical sciences? And I'm hoping to maybe start doing some research there. How do you help programs become, how do you help universities that want to change, that want to transform themselves, transform? I think that's really interesting to me also. I still see myself doing math, although more of it would be with students, because I think if there's an experience that I wish I would have had as an undergrad, it would have been research, just so I would have seen, oh yeah, I can do this. Math isn't like we thought, like we were talking about earlier, it's not for the geniuses, it's math, you just got to work hard. And if you have a research experience, you go, okay, if this is what math is, then I can do this. And so I see myself doing research with students still, mathematical research with students. And then, yeah, and then maybe in 20 years, my baby will be 20 years old, and maybe I'll teach her, maybe she'll be in my math course.
Who knows, maybe she'll be teaching you.
Maybe she'll be teaching me.
Who knows?
Yeah. So I see myself continuing this work. I see this work really is important to me. Sometimes I kid with my wife that I'd like to maybe, play around with industry, just kind of go out maybe in a summer and just have a internship, just to see what that's like. More, not really for me, but more for my students. Once I have the experience, I can help them with the experience. But I don't know if that'll happen now that we have a baby. So we'll see. I think I'm still curious about math, and I still want to learn. And I don't think that'll ever go away, and that's a good thing, because that's what my job is just to be curious and learn about what else is out there.
How old is the baby?
We've been trying for 13 years, and she was born 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago, about 8 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
What's her name?
We're having sleep. Annalisa. Yeah, Annalisa. Yeah. So this is a new adventure for us. We're definitely learning how this is going to work out for us, especially being an academic and still having to do produce mathematics and math and other works. So it's it's been fun.
And I'm not sure if I got that. If you said her name, what's her name?
Oh, Annalisa.
Okay.
Anna. So it's like Anna, and so my wife's name is Melissa. So the last part is Lissa, so we just put it together, Annalisa.
Okay. Well, I have 3, and I didn't get any sleep doing any one of them, so I'm hoping you don't get any sleep. So for the payback.
Thank you. Thanks.
On the payback. Oh man, you touched on something that I'll just ask you to expound on just a little bit. We're just about done. This will be the last question, but because I know that you could easily be off in industry, where you would have a much more lucrative salary, or maybe even government. But you chose to stay in academia. And what is it about academia that's really attractive to you?
There's a lot of things that are really attractive. Some of it's sort of the part of it is, you get to construct your own time, projects you want to work with. You have a lot of freedom in that sense. But to me specifically, it wasn't just academia. I didn't just want to be at a university. It had to be a university like a Cal State. Like there was sort of a goal in mind here that there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of, there is a lot of talent. Sometimes talent can be used in a weird sense, in a bad sense, I guess. But to me, all these students that we serve at a Cal State, I would say 60% of them. So I believe we serve 500,000 students at the Cal State system. 60% of them are underrepresented. So that's about 300,000 students. That's a major talent pool. And there's a lot of work to be done. Obviously, we're not being represented. So I'm thinking I wanted to be where the talent is at and where the underserved talent is at. I wanted to serve our students and make sure they had the best opportunities to kind of dream the dreams that maybe we didn't think we could dream. I know I was talking about earlier about the 6 students. There were 6 students that graduated this year. They were my first students in my calculus classes my first semester. And a lot of them, when I met them, I said, why did you choose math? Not all of them actually wanted to stay math. Some of them were saying, no, I just chose math because, my teacher told me that I can get into the program. Like, what do they say? I wouldn't be rejected if I chose math. Nobody applies for math, so I'd be accepted. So that's why I chose math, but I don't want to be math. I want to do something else. And some of them said, well, I don't know. I mean, I guess teach, but I don't really know. And so to see them now having graduated, pursuing dreams that they didn't think were there at the beginning, PhDs, masters, working in industry, those are the things that sort of make me, I guess, fulfill me. And this is sort of what the work that I want to continue doing. And so I feel like in academia, I still have a chance to sort of help students sort of find their path, find out what they want to do, because it's really hard when you're first generation or when you're a student that's underrepresented. You don't know who to go for to ask questions, and so to be there and be representing, to look like them, and then be able to tell them, hey, this is what we can do, and have some answers for them, or at least help them find some answers. I think that's the part that really is fulfilling, and I think it's something I feel comfortable helping them with, I guess.
Oh, Roberto, we've covered a lot of ground, and
right.
I've asked a number of questions. But in closing, did I miss anything? Did I miss from asking anything? The ideas for this interview to get to know you as people watch it, and to get some good advice. So, in your closing remarks, do you have any thing that I missed, or any other advice that you want to give?
I think what I wanted to, I guess, say was there's a lot of people that have made it possible for me to be where I'm at. Like, first of all, my parents, for them to take that chance, they were undocumented. For them to take at 17 and 20, for them to take that chance to cross, cross 2 countries, because they're from Guatemala, so they had to cross Mexico and then cross to the U.S. So at 17 years old, I was, in high school, and my mom's crossing over just to give us a better life. That, first of all, I want to thank them for taking that chance, and for working so hard, for working 2 to 3 jobs sometimes, just to make sure that we have these opportunities, my sisters and I, and my brother and I, to have these opportunities to kind of to pursue our dreams. I want to thank them. And of course, my wife, she's sometimes part of the story, but she's the first one who ever told me that I could get a PhD in mathematics. And I kind of doubted her for a while, but she kept insisting that I could do it. And luckily, she's more extroverted than I am, so she was able to make some connections. And like I said earlier in the story, that advisor that told us Iowa, it was actually her advisor, her mentor. I just happened to be in the room. So I have to thank her, because of the way she is, and because she's so because she's not afraid. I guess she's not as timid as I am. I've been able to get this. So this would not have been possible there. And then for her to say, let's go to Iowa, she put her career on hold for a while. And now she's getting a PhD, but she put her, she was working on her master's, and we decided to go together at Iowa. She was going to pursue that program herself, but took some time off. So for her to kind of give that up so that I can finish has been really helpful. And so now she's pursuing a PhD in math ed. So she's been really,
great.
Yeah. And then of course, all the people in the Math Alliance, from Phil, you and David, and some mathematicians I met along the way, Bill and Pamela. There's just so many people out there that have really been helpful in helping me guide my career. And then Cal State Fullerton for the opportunity to try this out. I mean, they sort of took a chance on me because I got hired as a math education with only a master's in education. So I want to thank them for taking a chance and letting me also pursue these passions of mine, but at the same time still do math. They've been very supportive of the work I do, both as a mentor and as a mathematician and as a math educator. So it's been a great place to work. And I think, and then I guess the advice is that's how many people it took for me to be where I'm at. So I mean, and if any, I'm listed on the mentorship site at Math Alliance. So if anybody needs a mentor and wants to talk, feel free to send me an email. My email is on there, and so I'm happy to help. It's hard to do by yourself, and we need as much help as we can.
Oh, I'm losing you.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Got you.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Well, you've been a great asset to the Alliance, and we certainly appreciate everything that you've done for us, and we thank you for doing this interview with us, and I look forward to kind of following your career along. And I've just only one last request before we wrap this up from you. Would you be kind enough to give that baby a big old hug for me?
Oh, definitely. I'm going up right now.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thank you too. Appreciate it.
And I look forward to talking with you again.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.